Welcome to the deep dive. We've got this stack of sources you shared, and we're ready to jump in, pull out the key insights for you.
Yeah, think of it like we're distilling it all down, helping you see what the material actually, contains.
So today's mission, it's really focused. We're looking at sources that raise some pretty big questions about government data collection.
And alongside that, present some really serious allegations about how certain high-profile investigations were handled.
Right. We've got material discussing criticisms, for instance, of the FBI and biometric data privacy.
And then other sources making, well, very strong claims about political bias, maybe even misconduct within federal agencies related to specific cases.
Now, this is really important up front. Some of this stuff, it's definitely politically charged.
Absolutely.
Our job here, our absolute priority, is just to present the information as it appears in the sources. We're staying impartial.
Completely. We're just
Yep.
conveying the ideas, the claims that are actually in these documents. No endorsing, no refuting.
We're just guiding you through what they say.
Exactly.
Okay, let's dig into this stack then, see what we find.
Sounds good.
So let's start with those privacy concerns, specifically around biometric data collection by the government.
Okay.
One source really highlights a report from the GAO, the Government Accountability Office,
Right.
and it asserted the FBI, well, failed to comply with the law, specifically about putting out privacy impact assessments, PIAs, on time for their photo systems.
Yeah, and the criticism that the source focuses on, quoting that GAO report, is pretty sharp.
Yeah.
It says these PIAs were submitted years late.
Years late. Wow.
Yeah, well, after the systems were already being used. Real-world use is the phrase the source uses, so not just testing.
Okay, years late and already in use. That's significant.
It is.
And the source mentions the response from the FBI and the DOJ, the Department of Justice, when they were asked about this, about not complying with the law on timing.
What did they say? Well, according to the source, they stated a PIA was started way back in 2008 for a pilot project, and that a privacy attorney was, consulted during development.
Okay, so they had some process.
But, interestingly, when pressed on why the PIAs were submitted so late, the source says they basically deferred those questions to the department.
Kind of vague.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where the source really lays out the core tension. It asks, how can the public trust the FBI with all this facial data?
Right.
When, according to the source citing the GAO, they didn't meet these basic legal checks for privacy assessment, at least not on time.
That's the crux of the concern presented there. And the source connects this skepticism, this lack of trust to other incidents.
Like what?
Well, it specifically brings up the OPM data breach. Remember that federal workers' info, fingerprints stolen.
Oh, yeah. Huge.
And it also mentions issues around 702 unmasking. That's revealing identities of Americans caught in foreign surveillance. And the source connects this contextually to Mr. Flynn, what it calls political gyrations, and Donald Trump, framing these as sort of background reasons for why there might be public distrust.
Got it. So, building a case for skepticism based on past events.
Exactly. And then the source highlights this really interesting exchange. It questions the FBI's defense that facial recognition is, quote, just an investigative lead.
Just the lead.
Okay.
How does the source push back?
It uses this analogy. It asks, well, if it's only an investigative lead, why doesn't the government just collect everyone's fingerprints or everyone's DNA proactively?
That's a pointed question.
It is. And the source then points to the FBI's stated policy for fingerprints and DNA.
Which is?
According to the source, it's strictly for a criminal law enforcement purpose only, like fingerprints taken with mugshots after an arrest.
Right.
Or DNA maybe suggested at birth or collected from a crime scene, as the source discusses it, not just general collection.
Okay, so there's a difference in stated policy there.
Right. And the concern raised in the source, based on this contrast, is this fear that the FBI is, and this is a quote, proactively trying to collect everybody's face.
Everybody's face.
Yeah, and potentially linking that to a, quote, network of cameras, leading to worries about misuse by nefarious hands or even, quote, somebody in government.
That's a pretty significant fear being expressed there.
Definitely. And this kind of leads into conflicting information that the sources present about what photos the FBI actually has.
Okay, conflicting info, like what?
Well, one source quotes an FBI official who claims they do not collect social media photos
Okay.
and that their main repository only has criminal mugshot photos. And they also specifically claim they do not have state driver's license photos in that repository.
So, mugshots mainly, no social media, no driver's licenses in the main system. That's the claim.
That's the claim presented from the official. But then the source brings in counterclaims from others.
All right, what's the other side?
Mr. Bedoya, who's quoted, calls that repository claim a technicality.
A technicality.
Yeah.
How so?
He states, according to the source, that the FBI does have access to driver's license photos from 18 states.
Access, not necessarily holding them in their database, but they can get to them.
Exactly. And that's photos of, like, more than a third of all Americans.
Wow.
And he apparently notes the FBI has searched these databases tens of thousands of times.
Tens of thousands.
And quoting GAO testimony within the source, those searches were never audited for misuse.
Never audited. That's a key point from the source there.
It is. And then Mrs. Lynch adds another layer, according to the source.
Okay.
She says the FBI also has civil photos in its repository in this big database called NGI IPS.
Civil photos, meaning not just criminals.
Right, not just mugshots and not just relying on accessing state driver's licenses. These could be photos from, say, background checks for jobs or professional licenses, things like that.
Okay, so that adds another whole category of images potentially in their systems.
Precisely. So when you put it all together, the sources we have really paint this picture of significant concerns about the scope of collection, the timeliness of those privacy checks, and these kind of conflicting accounts about what data, what photos the government actually can access or hold. Civil records, state databases, it seems complex.
Definitely complex. Okay, so moving on from the data collection concerns, the sources then pivot to another major theme,
Right.
which involves some very strong claims about political bias and how federal investigations were handled.
Yeah, this is where things get pretty intense in the source material.
One source makes this central claim, asserting there was a, quote, Trump trap.
A Trump trap.
Yeah, and alleging collusion between the FBI and Democrats. And it raises questions about the, quote, legitimacy of the FBI in matters pertaining to partisan politics. Pretty strong language.
Very strong. And the source tries to back this up by analyzing a specific exchange from a hearing between Jim Comey, the former FBI director, and Adam Schiff.
Okay, what happened in that exchange, according to the source?
Well, first, it presents Comey confirming the FBI was investigating Russian interference in the 2016 election.
Standard procedure investigating foreign interference.
Right. And including investigating any potential links or coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia.
Okay.
Then, the source highlights Schiff's question. He apparently referenced and quoted President Trump's tweet, the one alleging President Obama had wiretapped his phones in Trump Tower.
Ah, that tweet. I remember that.
Yeah. So Schiff brings that up. And then Comey responds.
And Comey's response was?
According to the source, Comey said, I have no information that supports those tweets. And then he added, the Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components. Basically, a flat denial from FBI and DOJ.
Okay. Seems like a straightforward denial of the wiretapping claim.
That's how it appears on the surface. But the source's interpretation of this exchange is radically different.
How so?
It claims this moment, this specific back and forth, was absolute proof of collusion.
Proof of collusion. Based on that.
Yeah. The source alleges Comey was given the questions ahead of time. It even draws an analogy to Hillary Clinton getting debate questions in advance.
Wow, okay, that's a significant allegation.
It is. The source asserts both Comey and Schiff were just, quote, reading their lines from a script. It calls the whole thing the Comey Con, K-H-A-N.
The Comey Con.
Yeah, presenting it as totally staged just for public perception, to generate headlines like FBI denies Trump's wiretapping claims.
So the source sees it not as a denial, but as a pre-planned performance.
Exactly, that's the claim. And the source then uses this specific moment to launch into much, much broader allegations.
Broader how?
It asserts this whole thing was part of a silent coup. An act of subversion to overthrow the president.
A silent coup. Okay, these are extremely serious claims in this source.
Extremely. It goes on to claim the Russian investigations themselves were really just about covering up what was in the Podesta emails.
Covering up Podesta's emails.
Yeah, and distracting from, quote, Hillary pedoplay and the network of known pedophiles and sex offenders harbored within the Clinton Foundation. Again, these are the direct, specific claims being made in this source material.
Right. We need to be crystal clear. These are claims from the source, not our analysis.
Absolutely critical. And based on all this, the source then asks this really blunt question, who the F is going to be investigating the FBI?
If the FBI itself is compromised, basically.
That's the implication. if, as the source alleges, the FBI is aiding and abetting the enemy of the American people and is part of a whole corrupt system.
And does the source elaborate on this corrupt system?
It does, by linking it to a whole range of broader conspiracy theories it mentions, things like secret societies, technic tyranny, a transhuman, posthuman agenda, the Georgia Guidestones, and even spirit-cooking drug pedophiles.
Okay, so connecting the specific political allegations to much wider, more extreme conspiracy frameworks presented in the source.
Correct, just reporting what's in the document.
All right. Now, shifting slightly, but still within this theme of investigations, the sources also put the FBI's handling of the Hillary Clinton email investigation under, quote, yet new layer of scrutiny.
Yes, that comes up as well.
What's the specific claim there?
The source highlights that the wife of an FBI official involved in overseeing the Clinton email probe, identified as McCabe, reportedly got a lot of campaign money.
Campaign money? For what?
For her state Senate run. The source says at least $400,000. And this funding allegedly came from a PAC, a political action committee, linked to Terry McAuliffe, the Virginia governor, described as a longtime Clinton ally.
Okay, so the wife of an FBI official on the case gets campaign funds from a PAC tied to a Clinton ally.
That's the connection the source draws, and its interpretation is pretty direct.
Let me guess, not favorable.
Not at all. The source calls it an attempt to put a down payment on influencing the FBI investigation.
A down payment? What?
Yeah. It says it's more than just bad optics, but an apparent conflict of interest.
An apparent conflict of interest. Does the source say anything else about this official, McCabe?
Yes. It also claims he was actually promoted within the FBI during the investigation.
Promoted while it was ongoing.
And assumed an oversight role in the investigation into Secretary Clinton's emails, according to the source.
Okay, so promotion and oversight role during the probe, plus the spouse's campaign donations from a Clinton ally PAC. That's the picture the source paints.
That's the picture. And there's one more technical point raised regarding the emails themselves.
What's that?
The source makes the assertion, you can't review 650,000 new emails in 8 days, referencing a specific point late in the investigation.
Implying the review wasn't thorough, perhaps.
That seems to be the implication. And the source sums up its view on the whole email investigation very definitively.
How does it conclude?
It just states, flat out, Hillary Clinton is guilty, she knows it, the FBI knows it, the people know it, presented as the clear conclusion drawn by this source.
Unequivocal statement from the source, then.
Very much so.
Now, the sources also seem to connect some of these threads to government surveillance, wiretaps.
Right, that comes into play as well. The source mentions reports cited from CNN.
Okay, what did those reports say?
One apparently stated that top intelligence officials had provided info about claims of Russian efforts to compromise President-elect Trump.
Compromise efforts. Okay.
And another CNN report mentioned the FBI was investigating an odd computer link between a Russian bank and the Trump Organization.
An odd computer link.
And the source asserts, citing reporting, that this is related to why a wiretap of Russian agents who were communicating with Trump staff reportedly picked them up. It suggests intelligence reports indicated this.
So the source is suggesting the surveillance was initially on the Russians, but picked up Trump staff communications, incidentally.
That's how the source presents that part, citing reporting. And then it makes a very, very firm claim about FISA warrants.
FISA warrants, those are from the Secret Court for Foreign Intelligence Surveillance, right?
Exactly. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act court. The source states, quote, we're 100% sure a FISA warrant was issued on the main investigation into Russian hacking.
100% sure.
Okay, and it also claims a separate warrant was issued to investigate the server that was registered to Trump Tower.
A separate warrant specifically for that server. That's a specific claim.
Very specific. And this is where the source brings in a New York Times article it cites.
Okay, what about the NYT article?
It reportedly said that the FISA court itself, the secret court, had identified more than 75 cases where it concluded it was misled by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Misled by the FBI in documents justifying surveillance.
That's what the source claims the NYT article reported. Documents justifying wiretaps and electronic surveillance.
75 cases. That's not insignificant if true.
Not at all. And the source's interpretation of this NYT piece is, well, pretty blunt.
What's the take?
It says the article tells us the FBI lies and that the FBI wiretaps individuals, and crucially, that the FBI has a track record of misleading the FISA court.
So establishing a pattern of misleading the court, according to the source, citing the NYT.
Precisely. And then the source ties all these threads together, it makes a concluding argument.
Connecting the dots, basically.
Yeah, it argues. Since the NYT article suggests the FBI misled the FISA court,
Okay.
and since the source previously claimed Comey scuttled the obvious case against Hillary for partisan politics,
Right, that earlier claim.
then, the source concludes, Comey, appointed by Obama, would obviously tap Trump's phone for partisan politics as well.
Ah, connecting the alleged motive from the Clinton case to the Trump situation.
Exactly. And conduct an illegal investigation into Trump. That's the final step in the logic presented by the source.
Wow, that's quite a chain of reasoning laid out there.
It is. And just to round that section off, the source also mentions the FBI, quote, quietly dumping more Hillary Clinton emails, like 300 pages.
More emails released later.
Yeah, which the source claims show her sending confidential and secret information to someone outside the government. It labels this the smoking gun that supposedly ramps up the case for prosecuting her.
Okay, so circling back to Clinton with a smoking gun claim near the end of that argument.
You can really see how the source weaves together these different elements, investigations, alleged motives, FISA issues to build its case.
Definitely. Okay, and there was one more distinct set of allegations in the sources you provided, right? Something about the Department of Homeland Security.
Yes, DHS.
Okay.
A separate issue raised. It involves claims about alleged hacking.
Hacking by DHS. What's the story there, according to the source?
Well, it cites reports from CNN and local news. These reports apparently traced possible cyber attacks in Kentucky and West Virginia
Okay.
back to the same U.S. Department of Homeland Security IP address that was supposedly found in a similar attempt in Georgia.
The same DHS IP address linked to attempts in multiple states.
That's the claim cited. Allegedly accessing election night results on Nova 7 2016 and a voter registration system around Nova 1 2016.
Accessing election systems from a DHS IP address. That's
Yeah.
unexpected.
To say the least. And then the source makes another very specific claim, this time citing the Washington Post.
What does it claim the Post said?
It claims the Washington Post now confirms that it was the Department of Homeland Security that hacked 20 different Republican states in the run-up to the presidential elections and not the Russians.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, claiming the Post confirmed DHS hacked 20 GOP states instead of Russia. That's a major assertion attributed to the Post by this source.
It's a very strong claim, presented as fact, confirmed by the Washington Post within the source material we reviewed.
Right. Important distinction. This specific allegation, while separate, seems to fit the overall theme in some sources of questioning government agency actions around sensitive times like elections.
It does seem to be included in that vein, yes. Another claim about government actions concerning critical infrastructure.
Okay, so, wow. We've covered a lot of ground here. What does this all mean when we step back? We've done this deep dive into the sources you shared.
Yeah, pulled out the key claims, the information presented.
And what really emerges is, well, a complicated picture, isn't it?
Definitely complicated. From the sources, we saw those criticisms about privacy assessments for government data collection, the FBI photo systems, the PIAs being late,
That a timeliness issue.
and those conflicting accounts about how much biometric data the government actually accesses. Mugshots, sure, but also maybe driver's licenses via Access, civil photos.
Yeah, the scope seems murky based on these sources.
And then you have the other set of sources making really serious allegations. Political bias, misconduct in investigations.
That whole Comey Khan narrative, the alleged stage tiering.
Right. Potential conflicts of interest like McCabe campaign funding situation. Questions about the thoroughness of the Clinton email review.
And connecting all that to claims about misleading the FISA court, maybe even illegal investigations driven by politics.
Plus, those extreme conspiracy themes mentioned in one source, and that separate allegation about DHS supposedly hacking election systems attributed to the Washington Post by the source.
A lot of different perspectives, sometimes clashing, all within this source material regarding government agencies, privacy investigations.
Absolutely.
And just to reiterate, our goal here was simply to extract and lay out the specific information and claims found in these sources.
Right.
We haven't endorsed anything, especially with those really charged political claims.
No, strictly reporting what the documents contain. That was the mission.
So this deep dive, it definitely leaves us and you, the listener, with some pretty important, maybe uncomfortable questions.
Sure. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah. I mean, given the power that comes with widespread data collection, which we talked about.
And these really significant allegations about institutional conduct, bias, potential misconduct that are present in these sources.
It makes you wonder, how do you personally approach evaluating information like this? How do you decide which government institutions, or frankly, which information sources, to trust in today's, incredibly complex information landscape?
And it's a huge challenge.
And maybe what parts of that balance between security, our individual data privacy, and holding institutions accountable, what feels most critical to you right now?
Definitely some heavy questions to ponder.
Indeed. A lot to consider there.